Blog number one. Got it, lost it, got it again, traded it in, got it back for good. How many of us have done the above or part of it? Had a great game back in the day, gone off to uni or moved in with a girlfriend and found said game was thrown out by the parents lovingly, or kept in the garage until it's nice and mouldy. Maybe you've had a smash hit game and traded it in for a newer game way back when, and now maybe you regret that. Sadly, it was especially a sign of the times and fashion of the early 2000s. I feel it wasn't just me. There must have been so many of us sold games on or left them to vanish into oblivion. To my defense, it was a different time back then. Retro didn't really exist. I know it's hard to explain, but back in 1999, let's say, you were into retro. If you'd said that, people would have assumed you meant Charlie Chaplin films or the art style of retro. It simply didn't exist on the vastness it does now. Trends and fashion change. Back then, dare I say, even early 1996, many great games and software were simply put out to pasture, sold on for pennies, literally pennies, given away to charity stores or even trashed. Let's give two examples. Off the top of my head, WizKid on the Amiga. The sequel to Wizball is a great game in its own right. It's actually quite hard to find in great condition, fully boxed these days, and not always listed on eBay. Anybody who ever even dabbles in selling on eBay would probably just list this game £25 to convert that into dollars later, at least, with the usual bite now attempts hitting maybe £50, or some cheeky ones even 100, but there again, if it's mint, fair enough. The game was worth, say, £25 back in, I think it was 92 it's released. It sounds fine these days to sell it for a bit more if it's in mint condition, but especially to people that are younger, did you know that in, say, 1997 you couldn't give this game away? Stores were fast selling PS1, Saturn, PC games and everything of the trend, and had hot new stock, everything to sort of fly off the shelves. So they even had fairly brand new Amiga stock, mint, often sealed, just sitting there, literally after a few months bunged into a bargain bin in the store with, I don't know, $1.99, $2.99 price tags, just literally to shift it. So even a little later, let's say in 2000, with the rise of trade-in stores, because they did exist back then, but then they have become big now, as we know. But in 2000, they started to grow. They rarely accepted disc games. I remember with myself having disc games, they just wouldn't take them. It's CD only, even back then. So many people would just bin the games in return for getting more storage space. Dark Savior on the Saturn, again the same thing. In the UK, it was at least this and other games around 2000 were sold by trading stores for, wait for it, a couple of quid, regardless of the condition. I'm sure I'm overstating this, but for those younger gamers happen to be listening to this, you're probably mere toddlers back in 2000, I guess. This must be an incredibly strange fact. Dark Savior goes for a lot in mint condition on eBay. I always say eBay, I mean that's where most people go to find games, but even if I don't mean in the wild and things, because obviously it'd be cheaper, but it's sort of natural price, if you will, auctioned on eBay. Then we come to high street trading stores, those that do retro. They know its price, and to many charity shops, even these days, they also, if they're on the ball for retro, will know the price. They may not go too retro, but they do know that they'll just look it up if they need to. But again, the idea of this being on a shelf, taking up space, alongside maybe 50 other Saturn games, let's say, in a shop, and perhaps even 3 copies of the same game side by side, and now it's worth more than the recommended retail price. It's a sign of trends and fashion. No, to say fashioned, I mean fashion. Let's say, crazy example, had flights to Japan, let's say, gone from £700, I'm sure they were less back in, more I mean back in the 90s, but had they gone down from, let's say, £700 to 70 quid, can you imagine that? And in 2000, they were 70 quid, and now they've rocketed back up past 700, now they're 1,700. That's what I'm talking about. There would be an outcry. if that happened, especially now, because people would say, hey, how can the prices go so low and come back up again? Because the games are second hand, and obviously those that sell the games, as in the marketers, the releasers, the publishers, don't really have a say in that. So I think that's how it's happened, but it's still an astonishing thing. Okay, so I'm rambling. Chances are you probably already knew this. It just fascinates me to now look at games and remember the original release price, the full price at its lowest, and the value now it's on eBay. Then there's the equally daunting realism that people complain a game on Steam, let's say, has 12 hours of gameplay and comes at a cost of, say, £30. When us old enough to remember the start of the Amiga, we were paying the same, £29.99. Especially at the start of the Amiga. I know games kind of leveled out at 25 quid, but they were £29.99 back in 1985-86 for a game that had maybe 35 minutes worth of gameplay. The only thing stopping you taking that time, making you go longer, is the difficulty level. But essentially, let's say 35 minutes of gameplay. It's absolute madness. And add to that inflation, I guess we were paying around, I don't know, £35 in today's value. Games were simpler back then, that's true. They had to be, not just because of technology and that being basic, but also because the world was still kind of getting used to computer games and video games. What else do I want to say? How about SNES, for example? I've been watching on YouTube a program, I'll come to that in a second, but for any SNES fans out there, did you beg your parents to get you that great game on release, the actual release market price? That would often be £50 or up, say £55 price tag. Again, if there's any younger people, if you don't believe me, YouTube, while I was watching Bad Influence, a British TV program, not very good, but it's nostalgic, that's why I like it. Watch a few episodes and literally just gasp in disbelief, as most SNES games are listed at £50 to £60 recommended retail price. Now I know, okay, most people back then would have got it mail order, but if you went into the shop the initial week or 2 weeks it was first released, you would have been prepared to pay £50 or £60 for one SNES game. And I just think that young people nowadays, and this sounds silly, I don't really know what to call you, but let's say people that are 18, 19 and maybe haven't looked into this, don't know this or whatever, downloading ROMs for free, saving the entire SNES collection, all the games you can play at will. Back in the early 90s, it would have been rare for a SNES player, you can't be called them collectors, but to say a player, to have more than, say, 10 titles. And this is where it comes full circle, because trading up was about the only way that you could get new titles. Otherwise, you'd have to have incredibly rich parents. So yeah, that brings me full circle at last to why a lot of us back then, we had to trade up and trade in quality titles. This is why we gave away classics. And again, to the younger people that are into collecting, or at least delving into the past and love the games, that's why us older folk, we're bitterly complaining. We're always having to resort to buying back games that we had. And that may seem a crazy concept to younger people. It's not just we had it and that's it. It's that we had it, we shouldn't have got rid of it, and we want to get it back again. And the concept that, yeah, we may not have had it when it was first released, but we may have bought it in 2000 for $2.99, and then we traded it up again, and now it's on eBay for 40 quid. Yes, I would be quite bitter, and that's why very often you hear people saying this in YouTube and whatever. It's not so much complaining, it's like I say, this weird fact of the trends. So this is my first written and audio blog. What do you call an audio blog? Just a blog, I suppose. No, vlog is video. And this is actually my first post on the internet in any way for 12 years. So what are your thoughts? Let me know via the contact section on this page. On the top you'll see it there. And yeah, any good comments and views I'll add to this blog. Just to finish this off, I had a C64 and Amiga, so I mainly had those games back in those days in my collection. I'm now starting to get stuff I dabbled in, such as the PS1, Saturn, Dreamcast, and starting to get those games back. I also really fondly remember the early 90s PC games. and trying to get those back near enough mint, fully boxed, it's very hard. A lot of them I need to import from America, and that's very costly. And a lot of games have been forgotten. For example, Requiem, Fallen Angel. I still love that game. It hasn't aged too well, but the story and the art, the general universe is superb. So, yeah, I'm at long last content that I've got my games back, relatively speaking, and I can assure you I will never, ever trade, sell, or unlove them ever again, or so help me God.